Since there's no job security in America right now for anyone that's not, I guess, a high level employee or an executive or part of the important people at work, today and this morning when I left the house, I had no idea that I would feel the Grim Reaper's cold hand on my shoulder at some point during the morning. But of course, when HR comes looking for you at your office, you know that there cannot possibly be a way that you're going to save yourself from getting fired. That's usually how they take you out. They come, they tell you that you're being relieved, and then security shows up, grabs you by the neck, and takes you out to your car and tells you to never come back. That's how I've seen it done my entire life, where a person becomes unnecessary and they get rid of you. And usually there's not a whole lot of time to get your things or to prepare yourself or to tell anyone that you're being let go in a very ugly way. So this morning, when that person showed up at my office, I knew that it couldn't be anything good. But as you guys well know, this channel isn't about just telling you. I'm going to tell the story from beginning to end. So I have three distinctive things that happened to me at work today, and that was one of them. And another one was from a coworker, again, someone I've never met in my life, but is one of the most fascinating women that I've met in my entire life that I've never met in real life. And I've been talking to her every day, probably for about 3 to 5 months. And not the one that I met yesterday at the executive get together, but one that lives way over in New York. And she doesn't, like, when I talk to her on the phone, she sounds so harsh. But for the first few months that I knew her, every morning when I would call her and I'd ask her, Susie, are you still mad? And she's like, I'm mad as hell. And I was just like, why are you so mad? And she just was deeply unhappy with what she was getting out of her life. She wanted more out of her marriage. She didn't want the kids that she had. She regretted having children. She's the only woman that I've ever met in my entire life that refers to her children in a negative light every single time that I talk to her. She doesn't want those children. If she could push them back up inside of her and never have them, that's what she would do because she's deeply unhappy with them. She hates the way they smell. She hates how much they cost. She hates that they're growing up. She just doesn't like her children. And it's very rare to meet a person that's that angry over getting sour grapes in life, especially a woman who's been married as long as she has and is not satisfied with the whole roommate situation with her husband because she's financially stuck with this man, whether or not she wants to be with him or not. Also, her job isn't her favorite thing to do. But with that said, let's get into doing this in a way in which it correlates with the timeline of my day. So I went out to check out this new place. So I typed in fried chicken. For some reason, I haven't eaten anything that tasted halfway decent in a while, and so I typed fried chicken into the Google machine. It came back with a place called Crunchy Fried Chicken. Highly do not recommend this place. It wasn't expensive. It was about $10, but it also isn't a place that I would visit again. I went, I got my fried chicken, brought it back to my office, I set it down, and then the school president bursts through my door and says, Hey, millennial, stay in my computer doesn't work. And of course, my fried chicken's right there, but my work awaits me over there. So I went over to try to fix this problem, which again is not my job, but when you sign up for these types of jobs, all duties as assigned. So I come back from switching him over to a different system because the one that we were using got broken again by Microsoft Windows updates. Soon as these machines update, it breaks something on the machine. And it can be anything. I have a machine sitting in another room that, regardless of what you connect to it, it does not see a peripheral anymore. Just updated and broke. And so I called up the guy that's responsible for fixing these things, and he said to me, I guess I can't repeat all the four-letter words he was using on the phone, but it was enough for the person that I was helping to remove themselves from the situation. And I hung up with him, and I just was like, you know what? We're going to have to figure this out. So I walked back to my office, and I'd say 15 minutes went by. I had just finished eating my fried chicken, and just like any animal in the wild, I could sense danger. Danger was approaching me every second that I was in my office this morning, and there was no warning of what was coming. You could just feel the coldness in the air, right? HR was approaching MS. And so as I stood there, as I heard a familiar voice, and then I heard a much uh, higher pitched voice, right? A woman's voice. And in walks the Grim Reaper. This is the person that hits you across the knees and takes you out and asks you, does it hurt? Yep, that's how I would describe anti human resources in America. Does it hurt to lose your job? No, it feels just fine. Just give me another kick. Just, angle it at a slightly different part of my body, and I'll just have to grimace and tell you how great it is. So they walk into my office, and she hugs me. And I'm like, uh oh. Is this like one of those Italian things where you get the kiss of death, and this I'm getting the hug of death? It's like, um, yeah, I didn't know how to act. The only times I've ever interacted with this person are on the phone, and there's tension between my department and their department at all times because I waste money and they don't like wasting money, but I have to waste money. I waste a lot of company money, like millions and millions of dollars worth of company money. So I sensed that the end was imminent. Like I started looking at the things on my desk and I thought, well, at least I can carry these couple things with me as I get, kicked out. Um, but no, it was not one of those. It wasn't meant to be today. She'll get me someday, but not today, Satan. So, I showed her my office area. I showed her, what I do for the company. I walked her around my area, and after about, say, 3 minutes, we walk up to the front door, and she says, "You're doing an amazing job. The executive office acknowledges that you are doing a great job, and we really appreciate what you do for this place." That's 100 times more than anything I've ever gotten from my direct supervisor in the entire time that I've worked for this corporation. So, with that said, that was a very fascinating experience this morning. But now let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's get back into this woman who has been a life coach. That was what she did before she started working here. And she's deeply unsatisfied with her current location in life. And I mean everything, right? As I said earlier, she doesn't even like her children. But in talking to her all afternoon and then having a rather long conversation with her while I was doing my cardio, it came out that she spent over $20,000 of her money that she's still paying back on self help seminars because she needed to get to a better place. She's like the female version of me that can't stand being me. They just simply will not tolerate that life has given them grapes and they want to change their thought patterns, they want to change their life, and they want to do it through self help. And I have never understood that. I've never understood why people can't accept that their life sucks. And I've noticed that this is the self help industry is very much so catered towards women, right? It definitely appeals more to them than any other group that's out there because women find it harder to settle into what men have gotten used to. Being unhappy with your job, not having a relationship, not making enough money, and feeling like a total loser. Letting that L around your neck drag you through life all the way to the bottom of the ocean with no hope of ever coming back for air. And so I told her this. This is something I said directly, and I copied this directly out of my notes today because this is how I told her that I've coped as a man who will never, ever have a relationship with the opposite sex. I gave up a long time ago. Parts of me haven't gotten the memo yet. That little guy between my legs seems to still believe that there is hope in this world for him, regardless of how many times I've beaten him. To, you know, someone just said that you need to shake it up when you're shaking hands with the governor. The governor refuses to acknowledge that we are an evolutionary dead end and we will never have friends. We will never be in a relationship and we will never be happy. That was never going to be a part of my life. That was from the moment I was conceived by Johnny Sixpack behind the Taco Bell. Susan Rottencrotch ensured that the rest of my life would be ruined by not providing anything that I needed. Nothing. There was no education. There was no family. There was no money. There was no home. There was no car. There was no teaching. There was nothing in this world. There's a lot of bastard children like myself out there who have no idea what they're doing. They're scraping by through life. Women find them repulsive, disgusting, in every conceivable way. And she didn't understand. She rejected this idea that I would say these things because in her own mind, and as she said this to me today, and it was very sweet the way she said it to me. She's like, "I really care about you, MS." And I thought, this is a woman who's still struggling to accept that life sucks. And this is how I told her that I cope with this, right? Because most women couldn't live like a lot of us lonely men live. They wouldn't accept it. It's just not acceptable to be that way. So I said to Susie, as a man who has failed at every aspect of life myself, including the relationship part of life, failure all the way to the nth degree, I said the only way you can continue to live in this state of mind, in this state, this spiritual state, this emotional state, this state where depression and sadness and panic attacks and anxiety are your everyday tools for coping with what you were given and how you're experiencing your life. And I said, in order to stay alive like this, you have to come to these three things. You have to adapt to being alone. It's not something that's easy. And a lot of young men are going to do a lot of bad things until they learn to adapt to be alone, to being lifelong alone. To shake hands with the governor morning, noon, and night for the rest of your life. It is a very hard realization. No pun intended. That little guy still wants attention, but you have to adapt to the alone life. No adaptation, bad things happen. And chances are, if you do go down that path, you're going to find yourself in a place where you're going to get all the love that you need and you're going to be surrounded by all your friends in a place with bars and you are wearing all a certain colored same suit. And of course, this is impossible for a lot of men. They are going to end up in a place where fleece is going to whisper to you in your ear the hard way. Number two that you have to come to accept a life as miserable as millennials team is you have to be self motivated. No one's going to come to your house in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and tell you you have to get up, millennials team. You have to get up. You have to have the self motivation to go back to your level zero job. Every day that you want to live and you want to have food, you're going to have to find the motivation to go to a place that you don't like, that doesn't like you, and that you don't want to be at. Just like this woman that I mentioned, she absolutely despises her work. And the reason for it is it lacks creativity, it lacks a career path, and it doesn't pay enough money for her to live on her own. She is entirely dependent financially on a man that she probably doesn't let touch her anymore because of the way that he's treated her on a lot of things, especially the spending money on things that he didn't believe that she should be spending money on. If you asked me, if I was in a relationship with a woman and she said I need to spend $20,000 on self help, I'd be like, you need to find yourself another sucker. Unfortunately, he stuck around, and so he's also stuck with that enormous bill for self help. So you've got to be self motivated. If you don't go to work, if you can't go to school, if you can't motivate yourself, you're doomed. And that's the conclusion that I've come to. The third thing, and this is the most important out of the three, is you have to become immune to failure because you're going to fail at life. You're going to fail to have the respect of your family. You're going to fail to have the respect of your community. You aren't going to have any friends, and people that meet you are not going to want to be around you. So you have to become immune to failure because that's all you are. When you're part of the lower tier of the proletariat, as I am, you have to learn that failure is where you live and you have to become immune to the way that it stings. It stings in a way in which you never get used to failure, but you have to get used to it. The only thing I could compare it to is that South American ritual for becoming a man. Remember, you have to learn to fail and be a man. And so that ritual that I'm talking about, it's I believe what are they called? They're a type of ant, and they put these gloves on your hands, and oh, they're called bullet ants. So they put these gloves on your hands that are full of bullet ants, and you've got to be able to withstand one of the most powerful insect stings in the animal kingdom hundreds of times while you're in these gloves in order to be able to progress to be a man. And so that's what being immune to failure. I imagine it's a direct correlation because a lot of the young men who end up passing out, they end up blacking out from how painful the ant stinks are from the gloves. And until they can get through this ritual, they will not be considered a man. And I think we have some sort of version of that here in America. And I hadn't put this together until right now that you have to become immune to those ant stings because failure hurts. And it hurts not just once or twice, but it's just like wearing the gloves. It's hundreds of stings simultaneously, and you can't get away from them because you can't be a man until you're able to deal with the pain and suffering of being a total failure. Because it hurts. It hurts me every single day that I have to wake up and wave at my roaches that are crawling around on the sink, look around at my house, owning nothing and realizing that I got to go back to my loser job. That's how bad life is. And until you can just stop hurting from the failure, you're just not going to be able to progress. Every morning that I wake up and I tell myself, not this again. I know it's this again. I got to pay the rent. This morning, I got a phone call from one of the companies I owe money to, and they're like, your payment this month didn't go through. And I'm like, I made the excuse that I had too many bills. And they're like, we don't want to hear it. Pay the $300 now. And I'm like, okay. So I just shifted it onto another card. Another way of failing is knowing you can't pay your bills. What are you supposed to do? You know, you're already working as many hours as you humanly can and you still can't pay your bills. It's another way of accepting failure. Is that some of us may never become a man. You can't be a man in a society where there isn't enough resources for you to be a man. And that's why a lot of people are postponing becoming an adult. You can't buy a home. You can't have a good job. You're not going to have a relationship. What are you doing? You know, what's the point of being alive if everything that you want is out of reach for the rest of your life? And that's what this world is full of, and that's why this channel exists. So I can tell you, all of you out there, you're not alone. We're all failing together. And the only way out of this system is to break the system and create a system that doesn't require you to put on the gloves full of ants.